guys, and welcome back to the Windows Phone tutorials. This is the third tutorial. Definitely a lot more cheery today, not so tired after the second tutorial we just had. That was, yeah, I was very tired. Anyway, moving on. What we're going to be doing in this tutorial is we're going to be using the buttons, using the click event, and then messing around with some text box and some text blocks, not to be mistaken there. So, first of all, we're going to go ahead and, well, you can use the same project. In fact, let's use the same project. I'm going to use the same project that we used in the previous one, which is the variables project. There's no need to make a new one because we're not doing anything spectacular. So, the first thing I'm going to do is take out this code because we don't really need it. And I'm going to go ahead onto the main page and we're going to work with the designer. So, I mean, not a lot has changed from the designing point of view between 2012 and 2013 of Visual Studio, but, you know, it's all the same. I don't really need to explain much other than what I normally do before I set out any page. It's the same old stuff. I take out all the bits that I don't really want, which I do find a lot easier now doing over here in the actual code rather than in the designer. So we're just going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit, give ourselves a nice blank area, get rid of all the stupid comments. Okay, right, there we go. So obviously the same thing as before, system tray, and we're setting that to be invisible because we don't want the tray to appear on in our application, because then that means that we'll have either a black bar or a white bar across the top, because some people have white, the light theme and the dark theme. So it just helps to keep the page a little cleaner, in my opinion. So I don't really like black either all that much, so I will be changing that to like a darkish grey. You might argue that's still black, but I don't know, I prefer that. Anyway, buttons. We're going to drag a button in here from the toolbox, and I'm going to go ahead and just call it my button. Obviously we're using the whole naming, we're keeping the conventions pretty simple. I like to put capitals actually, but we know now that this button will be referred to as my button. What else are we going to want? We're going to need a button, we're going to want a text box, that's definitely what we're going to want there, and then we'll also want a text block, but we won't be using that just yet, we'll use that in a minute. So we'll just drag that over there in case we put anything long in. Right, so in order to get the button click event, you can actually go down to the properties here in the bottom right hand corner. When you've clicked on your button, you should see the little lightning strike. That's the event handlers, and in here you'll have things like clicking, double tap, having focus, losing focus, whether it's up or down. What you can do though is if you just double click on it, it will automatically generate the click event code for you. Don't do this for images and things like that, because images don't have the click event, so they don't default to that. You get something totally unrelated that you don't want. So when you're using it with an image and you want to make an image to something on a tap, you need to use the tap function, not the click, because images don't click. Alright, so we need to now name our text box, which I'm going to call my text box. I'm going to put a capital on that T there. Okay, and then I'm going to call this one my text block. So the difference between the text block and the text box: in a text block you can't just enter your own random text when you're in the application. I mean, you can from here, you can change the text here, but you can't do it when you're inside the application. So this is good for using when you're like writing out some information, or if you're doing like a scoreboard or anything like that, you can write some information into here, which is quite nice. I'm also going to empty this text box. So under the common tab on these kind of text boxes and text blocks, you'll have the text area, and this will allow you to set some default text or to take out stuff so that it's clean for when the user starts the application up. Otherwise you're going to have the default text inside those boxes, which isn't all that nice. So now that we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our class file, and we are going to make our button do something. So we can actually mess around here and play around with the strings like we were doing before, where we can do a string, and we'll call it my string, and we will make it, let's just make it hey guys. There we go. So we now have a string sat there, and we know that if we call that string, it's got a green line at the moment because what it's saying is that it's been assigned, but it's not being used at all. We will be using it, so that line will go away, but we know now if we call my string, we will get the text hey guys. So what we'll do is we'll do my text block, and we'll set the text block, and when you do this you have to do .text, because that refers to the text of the text block, because otherwise you'll end up with all sorts of other properties such as its tag and its alignment, style, and if you don't put text in here you won't get the text to change. So if we set the text to equal, and the reason we don't do double equals is because when you put two equals next to each other, you are saying, if you're kind of saying, is it the same as? But where we're setting it equal to something, we're saying this is what we're going to put in here. So we're going to put in my string, and we'll just close it off with some semicolons, and that should do the job there. What we could also do is we can have another string called my string 2, which will say text box text, and when we click our button, we will set our text box, and we'll set the text of that to become my string 2. Now this might seem a little pointless, but it's just to try and help you understand how the text boxes and text blocks work, how we can pass these string values, and generally just how to make things work. So while we wait for my emulator to start up, I will just say what we're going to do once we've got this to work is I'll show you how you can use data that the user enters into the text box, and how you can use a button to put it onto the text block. So this will allow you to kind of have so that they can change their own data, and I mean you can think of a million different things to do with this kind of thing. The simple little things that we're doing now, you'll find will be some of the key components when you come to build an application. I mean, I don't know how many applications I've built that were built around these concepts. So the reason I'm teaching you some of this stuff is because it's all stuff that I've used, and it is genuinely useful. I don't want to just teach you a lot of rubbish that no one cares about. So yeah, that's what we're doing. Right, finally the emulator has actually started up. I should have had it running anyway, but that's my bad. Okay, so as you can see, that was the text that we entered when we first started messing around with this, when we put it on the designer over here, and you can see that I typed that in as the standard text, so that's what we get when we start the application up. If we press our button, you'll see that our text box has now actually got the string, because we set the text block to become my string, which is hey guys, which you can see has now appeared here, and then our text box has now actually got the text of my string 2, which has gone into here. So that's kind of what we wanted. So now what we can do is, if we just get rid of this code and we do this instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make my text block, and we're going to set the text of my text block to become my text box text. Now this is going to effectively take any information that our users have entered into our text box at the top and put it into the text block. So let's go ahead and see if this works. There you go. Beautiful. Only thing you will find now is if you don't have any information in here and you do it, you will end up with a blank text block. So you might want to have some sort of you can do some sort of catching or some sort of checking when you're doing this kind of thing. I mean, we can do one really simple thing that you can do is you can do if, and you do my text box dot text dot length is more than 0. What you're effectively doing here is a nice simple if statement, and what this is saying is if the text in the text box and its length, so it's what's inside the box, is more than 0, then we know it's not empty, so we can make it do something. And in this you'll find that if you're entering information initially with some data in it, what should happen is we enter something into here, like, I don't know, a smiley face, and it goes into the bottom box. But if we take this out and just press the button again, our smiley face doesn't disappear because there's no information in that box. But then if we change it again to, I don't know, a slightly happier looking face, it changes again. So that's just one way of checking if your text box has actually got any information in it. Now this is useful when you're doing some sort of form submissions, because when people are submitting forms you don't want anything to be empty. So this is a really good way of checking that users are actually entering something in your box so that you don't end up with an empty string later down the line. So that was the third tutorial. That's just a quick look into text box, text blocks and buttons. Now what we can do is we can start to apply this a bit better. What I'm going to do in the next tutorial is I'm just going to explain how we can layer all of these tools out in the designer, and how to make it so that with the different screen resolutions, if someone decides to use some of the larger devices and the bigger screens, especially with some of the plans that Microsoft have got in the future, it's kind of useful to have our apps resizing themselves according to the screens. Now in Windows Phone this isn't as much of a big deal as it would be in Windows 8 with the Metro. You definitely need to keep track of what you're doing in the Metro with the kind of designers, because when someone puts the screen horizontally and they've got all these different resolutions because they're ranging like a normal desktop does, things start to get messy. So in the next tutorial I will go through like the margin stuff and a quick overview of how we can do all those bits. So that's it for this tutorial, and I'll see you again in the next one.